You guys may or may not know, it's all about drinking alcohol. Is it good? Is it bad? What the church's teachings are on it, etc., etc. So to do that, we have Nikhil here. So whenever
you've already started drinking, by the way.
Yeah, and I suppose during this time, if you guys have any questions, you can put them into the chat. If not, you can private message Roshan and he'll ask for you, or you can wait until the end of the talk and just unmute your mics and ask it as well. So whenever you're ready, Jetta.
Super, thanks, Alicia. I don't know why we're taking questions. I think we might have a discussion later on, because I'm not a resident expert on alcohol or anything. I can just share a few thoughts and what the church teaches. So this is quite a curious topic. Even in the discussion when we were trying to get this going, there's a lot of puns being made in the background because people got very excited about the topic. Things like alcohol, vodka, and you do about it, and what cider you on. And Evelyn contributed a lot, Thomas as well. I think it's a topic that everyone got excited about. So I think it's important to look at it because we may come from varying different backgrounds where alcohol is maybe portrayed in varying different ways in our own families. So, for some people might be raised thinking that, drinking alcohol to any extent is normal, or in moderation is normal, or in some families, alcohol might be demonized. So I think it'd be good to just have a chat about it, just to see if we can tease out what's the right thing to do in relation to alcohol. I want to start off just by sharing a verse from the Bible, just to ground us, just to anchor us. And it's just a reflection on our identity. It's from Romans, and it says, "None of us lives to himself, and none of us dies to himself. If we live to the Lord, and if we die to the Lord." So then whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's. So our identity at the core is not what we do. It's not the kind of person we are. It's not what family we belong to. It's just that we are children of God. So whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's. That's something good to have in our head as we talk about how we relate to alcohol. So I just want to tell you an incident from, I think it was first year of college. We were on a night out, and there's a guy in my class. Let's call him Nathaniel. And so everyone was in a group, and I wasn't drinking. And he was probing. He was like, "Why don't you drink, Nikhil?" And he's like, "Have you some sort of a flashback? Were you like very a heavy drinker previously, and something bad happened, or something bad happened in your family? Is that it?" And I was like, "No, just it's not my thing." I didn't know what to say, so I just said it's not really my thing. And I still remember that moment where I was like, "Jez lad, I wish I had that kind of discipline," as he just necked down his 5th pint. And same night we had another incident where there was another guy, let's call him Barnabas. He was like, "But Nikhil, why aren't you drinking?" Someone mentioned religion, and he's like, "But I thought you were Catholic." And I was like, "That's precisely why I'm not drinking," because I didn't know. It wasn't because of any sort of discipline or because any kind of righteousness or anything. I genuinely didn't know whether it was okay to drink. So I just erred on the side of caution, and I just didn't drink. So let's just examine, well, what is it? What's the morality of it? I think, like a lot of us, I was raised thinking that alcohol in itself was probably not the best of things. If you can abstain from alcohol, be a teetotaler, then that's probably the better thing to do. And then I remember, even though in my family everybody drinks, my uncles and my dad and everyone used to drink. Heck, in our family actually some of the women drink too. So then I remember seeing a picture of Pope Benedict XVI with a picture of beer in his hand on his birthday. Pope Benedict is German. He's specifically from Bavaria, as you might know. And that gave me pause. Was the Pope wavering in his commitment to Christ, or like a nefarious gang of bishops that were maybe peer pressuring the Pope into debauchery or something? But then when you look into it, that's not the case. So what does the church teach officially? As always, as I've found, whatever the church teaches lines up perfectly with reason. It makes sense. So alcohol in itself is not sinful. It's a good in itself. It's fermented fruit, you know, it's something that can be used for enjoyment. So alcohol in itself is not sinful, nor is it a bad thing. If you want to look at the Bible itself, Jesus drank, the people around Jesus drank. His first public miracle was turning water into wine. At the Last Supper, there was bread and there was wine. And at Jesus's request, the church has continued that through the centuries, and we have wine at Mass. And even in the church over the centuries, consumption of alcohol in moderation is, condoned. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Carthusian monks. So, there are Franciscan friars, there are Dominicans, there are various orders of religious brothers. There are the Carthusians as well. And the Carthusians are French, and they're known for their particular liqueur that they brew. It's a distilled spirit. It's called Chartreuse. And Chartreuse is apparently world renowned for its strong flavor and stuff. And then the Trappist monks are another order of monks. And among other things, they kind of support themselves by selling things like bread and stuff. But what they're known for over the centuries, I think since the 17th or 18th century, they've been brewing and selling beer. So Trappist beer is another thing that's quite famous. But then on the other hand, there's this kind of alcohol is okay kind of thing. But on the other hand, there is definitely a condemnation of alcohol. I remember a few years ago when I was first kind of bugged by this topic, I remember asking someone older than me in Jesus Youth, and he was telling me, look, you're not going to get a straight answer. You're going to find people on both sides, and you're going to find Bible verses to support both sides. There was a lot of wisdom in what he said. I don't think it's true that you're not going to find an answer. We will have an answer, hopefully by the end of today. There is an answer, but it is true that there are Bible verses on both sides, and you can find church fathers have written on both sides. So you find verses like in Romans, it says, let us live honorably as in the day, not in reveling and drunkenness. In St. Paul's letter to the Galatians, he mentions drunkenness along with other things that we know to be sins like idolatry or fornication, anger, carousing, envy, things like that. And in his writing in his letter to the Ephesians, St. Paul says, do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery. So then, how do you reconcile these two? I think the CCC, which is the Catechism of the Church, is a good place to go to. And the Catechism has just 2 lines in this. And it says, the virtue of temperance disposes us. The virtue of temperance, which another word for it is moderation, it disposes us to avoid every kind of excess. So be that the abuse of food or alcohol or tobacco or medicine, any kind of excess. The people who do it, who engage in drunkenness or a love of speed, by doing that, they endanger their own or other people's safety. They incur a grave guilt. That's what CC says on that. So every kind of excess. So it would seem that in moderation, it's okay, but the problem comes when you consume alcohol in excess. Now, I don't think anything I've said so far comes as a surprise to anyone. But I think the question is, where do you draw the line? What is excess? Because we may have very varying definitions of excess. Is it when I pass out? Is it if I wake up in A&E the next morning? Or is one drink too many? Or is it when you slightly start getting tipsy? What's too much? Because I don't think anyone would disagree that maybe drunk driving is wrong, or passing out, okay, that's probably too much. Or if you're making a scene out of yourself, if you're making a scene, that's probably not right. But there is a middle ground. There's a gray area between complete abstinence and going completely off your head. There's a gray area. How do you navigate around that? So just to make it a bit more concrete, I think this is a good way of maybe measuring excess. How do you define excess? I think it's when it starts impairing your reason or your judgment. I think that's excess. So some of the characteristics of God that are imprinted upon us two of them are intellect and will. So intellect is our ability to think and grasp ideas and make decisions. And then our will is our ability to act or not act, our ability to decide what we do, as opposed to just going on pure instinct. So intellect and will. So when the drink that you're consuming starts darkening your intellect or weakening your will, then that's probably excess. So practically, what does that look like? Anyone that's been on a night out or anyone that's been out drinking knows that your inhibitions are lowered. When you're out in a club, or if you're dancing or something, that things that you might be able to maybe guarding your emotions or the way you look at another person that you might be able to do when you're sober, those inhibitions are slowly taken away as you start drinking a bit more. So drinking can then lead to things like lust. You might be engaged in maybe inappropriate conversations that you yourself mightn't engage in if you were sober, or it might lead you to make lewd jokes, or maybe even just dancing with someone of the opposite sex. You might dance in an intimate way that maybe your future spouse wouldn't thank you for. These are all things that you wouldn't probably like to do, or things that you would guard yourself against, that you'd be vigilant about when you were sober. But after a few drinks, as I said, the intellect gets darkened and those inhibitions go away, and you're not really at your best judgment or your reason. It can easily lead to a spiral of bad decisions. And it doesn't have to end up in you end up in bed with somebody. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic like that. Even just like the way you might engage in conversation, or the way you even look at somebody who might be on the dance floor, or the way you dance with somebody. Even, those things that don't seem like the end of the world. But even those things can be the small things that kind of lead us away from God in those moments. So I think when your intellect, when your reason or your judgment is impaired, that's a good measure of excess. So in my own life, I drink very infrequently, but I always drink in context, first of all, I know that I can only handle light drinks. Not because I've ever tried hard, but I've just never felt a pull towards it, thankfully. Some people might feel a pull towards it, and for them, obviously, it's harder to resist that temptation. Anyway, I've always enjoyed, drinks in a way that kind of heightens your enjoyment of a particular situation. An example I can think of is I used to live in a town in a different part of Ireland, and maybe once a week or once a fortnight, all of us people who worked in the hospital, a few of us young people, would get together and we'd go play pool in the local pub. It was just a quiet little pub, a small little sleepy little town where not many people lived. We go to the pub down there, and there was just something beautiful about being around the pool table playing pool with maybe a cider or something in hand, and you found that kind of brought you together, conversations flowing. It kind of heightens your enjoyment of the moment. Or actually, my favorite thing in my life where drink is involved is I don't know if you know Bailey's. That's probably the only thing I realistically drink. It's a creme liqueur. It's a sorry, I probably shouldn't endorse things in this talk. But anyway, it's too late. I probably can't take that back. It's a really sweet kind of little creme liqueur, and we have it as a family every once in a while, especially on cold winter's evenings. Say let's it's snowing outside, there's a fire in the fireplace, the family's gathered around. You might be watching a movie or something, and Mum would be like, "Oh, Nikhil, let's we might have Bailey's coffee," and you've got a steaming mug of hot coffee, and just to put in a little bit of Bailey's in it, and just the warmth of that beautiful Bailey's coffee trickling down the back of your throat. It's not impairing your judgment. If you know where to draw your line, it's something that brings you together. We're gathered around the fire as a family, or even sometimes when friends come over. It heightens your presence in the moment. Conversation is flowing. It's kind of bringing people together. That's maybe, if you want to visualize it, that's, at least in my opinion, and I think I'm right here, that's alcohol done right. It heightens your enjoyment of the moment, bringing people together, conversation flowing, no impairment in judgment. It's a beautiful thing. So that's probably something that doesn't happen if you're downing shots at the bar, or things like that. So we know this ourselves. I remember Father Mike Schmitz, I'm sure most of us know him. There was in a video he was talking about how he was having a day off. I think he was on his own, and he was having a barbecue one sunny evening, and just had I think he had a bottle of beer or something with him, and he was on his own, and he was like, I just invited Jesus into that moment, and I was like, Lord, it's a great day, the sun's out, I've got a bottle of beer in my hand, and I just want you to be here. I invite you to be here with me in this moment. I want to spend this time with you. That's another example of maybe using alcohol enjoyably. So as always, the Holy Mother Church, in her centuries of wisdom, invites us to a balance. It doesn't, particularly endorse abstinence because it is a good, but it cautions against the dangers of alcohol, of drunkenness, but invites us to moderation. If you can enjoy it moderately, that's a responsible, that can be a good thing to do. So looking at the morality of it, if you want to really break it down, if I could put it in a line, it's not something to be demonized, alcohol. Alcoholism is, but alcohol in itself is not morally wrong, but it can lead to problematic issues. But this is probably the most relevant thing to us, probably the most important thing. You need to be able to contextualize it. What does that mean? You need to be able to think for yourself. You can take this principle, but you need to be able to apply it to your own context. That might vary. Just because it's morally acceptable to drink doesn't mean that there won't be situations there where although it's morally acceptable, it might be unwise, or imprudent to drink. Just like anything, just like say like fire, alcohol can be misused as well. You can be using fire to toast marshmallows. That might be a morally acceptable act. But if you're toasting marshmallows in a house of cards, that's probably not a wise thing to do. So likewise, there are situations that you need to be cognizant of where drinking might be a problem. So just looking at a couple of examples, like say if you're addicted to alcohol, it probably doesn't apply to most of us, but if you have an alcohol addiction, if you can't, if you're reliant on it all the time, then maybe the place to draw the line is just to go cold turkey. That I shouldn't, because that's the nature of an addiction. Once you start, you just go down and spiral. So maybe I should draw the line at 0. Let's say if you have a family history of mishaps, and there may be people whose lives have been significantly affected by someone in their family, maybe a father, or probably less likely a mother, or a sibling, or an uncle, or an aunt, or there have been times in your family where relationships just haven't been helped by the involvement of alcohol. And if that's the context you come from, maybe you need to be cognizant of that. Maybe if that's the reason your parents don't want you to drink, they prefer you don't drink, you can't be just waving the it's morally acceptable, it's an inherently not an evil kind of card in their faces. That probably isn't a wise thing to do. Or if alcohol on a night out, another time you shouldn't drink is if you're sad, or if you're about to make a decision, or if you're just feeling bad about yourself. Don't go down to the local and just start downing pints, or take shots. Or let's say if alcohol on a night out is leading you in general to a life away from God, or alcohol just happens to be part of your social scene, it's just something that you do all the time, and that kind of group is leading you away gently from God, unthinkingly, then you might need to reconsider maybe that social scene and alcohol involvement. So there are situations where even though drinking alcohol is morally acceptable, you might need to be cognizant of some of the situations you're in. One last thing, I think this is probably the most relevant. This is why I wouldn't go into some of the hard drinks or some spirits and stuff, is because you need to be cognizant, out of love again, you need to be cognizant of the effect, the example we might be setting, or what somebody, especially someone who might be looking up to us for an example, what kind of a witness we're giving to them, or what kind of an example they might take away from it. Especially as Christians, there is that thing about being aware of not giving scandal. You might remember when we were a couple of months ago, we were talking about St. Paul, how he mentioned it's okay to eat meat. There's nothing morally unacceptable about eating meat. But if there are people who are scandalized by your eating meat because they think that eating meat is sinful, then for the sake of your brother, for that person, out of love for them, you should stop eating meat. Now, that thing only makes sense in the context of love. Only if you are able to kind of deny yourself and say, no, I want to do what's right for him. I'm okay to put aside this wonderful thing of mine for that person's good in order to not give scandal. That's another reason for not drinking. So just to sum up, as I come to a close, at the end of the day, the bottom line is this: the church invites us to balance. Morally speaking, alcohol in moderation is morally acceptable. But having said that, you need to be able to think about it with wisdom and with prudence, because in your situation, the way you were raised, the way your family is, or depending on your family's past, it might be wise maybe not to drink at all. So it depends on the context. Just to give us a bit more from his side, maybe I'd like from a different angle, I'd like to invite Mathew just to share a bit more from another angle on this topic.
Yeah. Can you hear us? Sorry, hear me? Yeah, okay, cool, perfect. Thanks, Nikhil. Thank you so much for, I suppose like Nikhil, he was talking about a bit more of the, the church's teaching, and like just a bit more on the, I suppose the kind of the logical kind of reasoning behind it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to maybe just share a few thoughts, maybe like one or two thoughts, just like some practical kind of things that you might that we can like ponder on over the next few days, or whenever we if you're that person who's kind of trying to decide on whether I should drink in that situation, or should I refrain from drinking. It's just like one or two thoughts that I thought might be helpful. The first is about honoring your parents. And when I say this, you might think it's not relevant to the topic at all, but in actual fact, what I mean by honoring your parents is, so we all have a responsibility to respect and to honor our parents. That's one of our kind of duties as their children. And we do this by being honest to them and being truthful to them in all situations, in everything that we do, by being honest to them, right? So if there are certain actions or certain things that we do that we can't share with them, or we can't openly tell them that we know that we did it, then should we be doing those things? Because, for example, if you come back home after being out with your friends, if your parents ask you, so this is just in the context of drinking, if your parents ask you, did you drink, or were there drinking involved? Or if you're about to go out with your friends and then your parents ask you, are there going to be drinking, or are you going to be drinking? And if you can't be honest to your parents, so these are people, these your mom and dad, okay? So these are people who raised you, who knows you, who've been there essentially from the time that you were born, or even before that. So if you can't be honest to them, and if you have to lie to their faces, then is that morally correct? So if an action such as drinking causes you to do that, to kind of not to honor your parents, then should you do it? It's just a question that I suppose that you can reflect on. And if you think it's okay, that you had one or two drinks, or if you are going out and it's a social gathering, and and that you will be having maybe just a few drinks. If you think that's okay, then you shouldn't be afraid to tell that to your parents. Like, you shouldn't be afraid to open up to about that to your parents. Because if you feel it's okay, then you shouldn't feel, I suppose, ashamed or guilty about doing it if it's the correct thing to do. But if you're not able to do that, then should you be doing it? So that's so again, it's not like a question and answer. So it's like it's just a few thoughts that might help you and might be worthwhile just to ponder about. And the second thing is about peer pressure. So many people who starts drinking very young, it does it because or out of peer pressure. So, and it's not just in terms of drinking, but in a lot of things. I think like all of us, like if not like most of us anyway, at some point of our life, or we have faced kind of some kind of pressures from the group that we're in. And like personally for me, like I think I've had a lot of experiences where sometimes I might be the only one in the group who mightn't be drinking, and then it is kind of like hard to resist like the urges there, because when you're in a group of people and when you are kind of when you're the only one who kind of stands out, you really want to kind of try to fit in with the group. You just want to be part of the group. That's the only thing you want at that moment. You don't care about anything. You don't think about anything else. All you're thinking about is like at that specific moment that that this is what I want. I just want to fit in. And then you just and you're willing to do anything you want, anything to do to be part of the group. But the thing is that that's when when you're challenged like that, that's when you have to kind of, I suppose, keep your identity of who you are. So like in my own kind of personal experience, like every time that I kind of held on to that kind of identity, I think that one of the fears that we all have is that what will my friends think, or what will they think if I don't do this. But the thing is, like, if they are really truly your friends, they wouldn't judge you, or they wouldn't I suppose criticize you or anything. Because like in my own life, like many times when I've done that, my friends, like they respect me for the decisions that I make. So they don't kind of leave me out of things, because they value my friendship more than more than the kind of things or the substance that's there when we're together. And like that's that if and sometimes like you might think that it's easy to just like just to go with the flow. But then if you don't do that, and if you kind of stick to your, I suppose, that identity that you have, or that that kind of something that you want, something that you feel that this is the right thing to do, if you stick to that, then your friends, they will appreciate you for that decision. So just these two kind of thoughts. So firstly, honoring your parents. So being honest with them, being truthful to them, and not doing actions or things that cause you to lie to them. And secondly, about peer pressure. So being the same person everywhere. When you're in your group of friends, when you're in different groups, being that same person, not have masks and just to kind of pretend to be one person in one group and pretend to be another person in a different group, but to be the same person. So just these two thoughts, it'll be great if you guys can ponder on it. So yeah, that's it. I just wanted to share with that.